Hello there and welcome. In this episode, we're going to start working on something new. We want to create a shopping system. So if your game requires some kind of NPC that you can approach, you can buy things from this NPC or maybe sell things, then this is what we're going to work on in this episode and in the next few episodes. So first of all, we brought our player back into our small village because we want to create some kind of shop, some kind of NPC that will stand over here next to one of these houses. So at this point, we don't have any kind of NPC, any kind of model. We're going to open Mixamo. So in Mixamo, we're going to find some kind of model to be our shopkeeper. And I think that the best one over here is this Knight Pellegrini. So we're simply going to click on it. And before we download this model, we also want to attach some kind of animation to the model. So we simply go to the animations tab. And I'm going to use a very simple idle animation. So we can search for idle. And we're going to use this simple idle animation. And we can see it over here. Now all we need to do is click on download, FBX for Unity. We also want to keep the skin because we want to use this model for the animation, and we simply click on download. Now we're going to create some kind of folder named shopping system just so we can be organized. Shop system. And we're going to drag our model into this folder. Now, as you can see, the model doesn't have any materials, and that's just because we need to extract them first. So let's click over here and create a materials folder. And we also want to create a textures folder. Then we're going to click on our model. And over here in materials, we're going to click on extract textures. And we're going to select our textures folder. And it's going to extract all the textures over there. We also have a few normal ones, so we're going to fix this. And now our knight has its materials. We can do this as well for the materials. If you want to change some of the materials, we're just going to use them as they are. Now we're going to open our scene view. Let's just go into the village. And over here, I prepared some kind of place for the shopkeeper. We're going to drag this model over here into the scene. We're going to rotate it so it will face this way, but as we can see, it's a very small model. So in order to increase it, we simply click on our FBX, we go to model, and over here we increase the scale factor. So it's going to be something like 1.8. We're going to press on apply, and now the model will be larger. And if we run the game, we can see that our player will have the same height as this model. If we get closer, we can also see some kind of shininess on the material. So if you want to get rid of it, you need to change the material. But as we can see, we don't have a material. So we can click on it, but everything is blocked out because this material is a part of the model. So we can simply go over here and extract the materials as well. And now we have this material that we can change. And in order to get rid of this shininess, we can simply reduce the smoothness. Now we're going to rename this to, let's first unpack it from being a prefab, and then we're going to rename it to be shopkeeper. Next, we also want to be able to create animations for this model. We have our idle animation. So we're going to click on the FBX, we're going to click on rig, and over here we're going to select humanoid and create from this model. This will create an avatar, so we're going to apply. Now we're going to click on the shopkeeper and we're going to add an animator for the shopkeeper, and we want to select the avatar that was created. So we simply click over here and we select the knight avatar. So it's going to add it into this animator. Next, we also want to create a controller. So create animator controller, we're going to name it shopkeeper, and we're going to drag it into the slot over here. Now, if we click on our FBX and we expand it, we can see this idle animation over here that we downloaded with the model. In order to change it, we're simply going to select it and then press on Ctrl D. It's going to duplicate it and it's going to take it out of the FBX. So we have it over here, and we want to make it a loopable animation because we don't want this to just run once. It's an idle animation. You should always keep running this animation. So we select the animation and we click over here on loop time. Next, we're going to open our animator tab. Of course, we need to select the shopkeeper, and we're simply going to drag this idle animation over here, and this will be the default animation. So when we start the game and we run the scene, this will be the first animation, and for now the only animation that is going to run. Okay, so this will be this idle animation. So now if we run the game and we approach this shopkeeper, we can see that the idle animation is working. We don't really see much movement, but you can see this swaying around. And now it's not just a static model. Next, we want to be able to actually interact with this NPC and open our shopping system. So we're going to double click on the shopkeeper, and we want to add some kind of box collider that will be the trigger zone. And we also want a box collider that will actually detect our cursor, the selection, and we're going to be able to select and talk and interact with this NPC. So we're going to add a box collider. We're going to make sure it covers exactly the area of the NPC. So when we hover over this area, it's going to allow us to interact with it. Then we're going to add another box collider, but this one will be isTrigger, so don't forget to put isTrigger over here, and this will be larger, so we need to increase the size. We're simply going to click on this one, and we can see that it appears over here at the bottom. So now we're going to make it even bigger because we want the area for the trigger. So only if we stand in this area, we're going to be able to interact with the NPC, because we don't want to be able to interact with it when we are far away. Let's set it at something like 7, 7, 7. Now we already have an NPC script, but the NPC script deals with quests and things like that. If you want to have quests for the shopkeeper, then you can also add the NPC script. But for now, the shopkeeper will only give us the option to buy things and sell things, and we don't want to have quests for this NPC. So we're not going to touch our NPC script. We're going to create a new script for the shopkeeper, for the buying system. So we're going to click on the shopkeeper and we're going to add a new script. We're going to name it shopkeeper. You can also name it buying system or something like that, shop system. So we're going to create this script. Well, don't name it buy system because we're going to have a buying system and a selling system separately. So it should be something more general like shop system or shopkeeper. So inside the shopkeeper script, we're going to add two booleans that are going to track the different states. So public bool player in range, and also public bool is talking with player. Then in order to know if we're actually in range, we're going to add on trigger. So on trigger enter and also on trigger exit. And over here, we're going to do the same thing we always do. If other, which is the player, compare tag has a player tag, then we're simply going to set player in range to be true, but if it's a player and we exited this area, it's going to be false. Now we also want to have two methods for starting the interaction and stopping the interaction. So you can name them as you want, but we're going to name them talk and public void stop talking or stop interacting. Inside the talk, we're going to set is talking with player to be true, and also a method called display dialog UI or display shop dialog, something like that. And we also want to do the opposite. So is talking to player will be false over here. And we're going to have a method hide dialog UI. So we're going to create both of these methods. So simply click over here, generate, and also over here, generate. We're going to move them over here. These ones will be for the interaction. Now we want to add a few more references that are going to control this dialog UI. So basically, we're going to open some kind of panel that is going to allow us to use the buying mode or selling mode, or just to leave the conversation. So we're going to have of course, don't forget to add the Unity UI namespace, otherwise it's not going to allow you to import these UI elements. So we want to have a reference to the entire dialog UI. We want a reference to the buy button, sell button, and exit button. And we also want references for the buying panel and the selling panel, because they're going to be separate systems. Now we're also going to add a start method. And inside we're going to set all of these on click listeners. We also want to make sure that the dialog is false at the beginning. So we're going to simply take all of these buttons, buy button, on click, add listener. So we basically decide what will happen when we click on all of these buttons. So for each one, we're going to have a method. For the buy button, we're going to have a buy mode method. For the sell button, we're going to have a sell mode. And for the exit, we're going to have stop talking. Which is a method that we already have. It's this method over here. Okay, so we already have this. We need to generate both of these. We can also press on Alt-Enter, and it's going to allow us to do this as well. Alt-Enter, generate method. So now we have both of these methods over here. Now we're also going to deal with the display dialog UI and hide dialog UI. So all we need to do over here is use our actual shopkeeper dialog UI and set it to be active. And over here, we simply set it to be false. Now we want to deal with this sell mode, buy mode, and we also want to add another method, which will be dialog mode. So this is basically a way to switch between all of these systems. So the dialog mode is when we actually enter into the dialog, buy mode is when we select the buying mode, and sell mode is when we select the selling mode. Let's just place the buy over here. It doesn't really matter, but this will be the start. This will be the dialogue, stop talking. Of course, we can organize all of this. For example, we can add regions. So region on trigger events. And then we're going to end the region over here. And region, and now we can simply collapse all of this into this thing. We can also add other regions for these parts, but for now we're not going to deal with this. If you want to have some kind of order over here, you can do this. So now we're going to take care of these methods, the buying mode. So in the buy mode, we simply want to take our selling panel and make sure it's not active, right? Because this is the buy mode. We want to make our buy mode panel to be active. So there's nothing too complicated. We simply take these UIs, we turn off one UI, and we make another UI active. We also want to hide the dialog because we don't need the dialog UI anymore. So hide dialog UI. Then inside the sell mode, we're going to do the same thing, but just the opposite. Instead of making the sell panel false, we're going to make it true, and this one will be false. And of course, we still hide the dialog UI. And inside the dialog mode, we're going to take both of them, but we're going to make both of them false because we want to hide both of them. But instead of hiding the dialog UI, we're going to display the dialog UI. So now we have all of these methods. Over here, we have the buy mode, the sell mode, the dialog mode, we have the talk, the stop talking, we have display dialog UI, and hide dialog UI. Now, of course, we also need to add all of these references, but before we do this, we want to make sure that we can actually interact with this NPC. And all of our interactions are inside our selection manager. So over here, if we go to the top, we can see inside the update method, we have different sections for the NPC, the choppable tree, the interactable object. So we're simply going to add another option over here. So we're going to have a reference to the shopkeeper script. And we're basically doing the same thing we always do. We get the script and then we check if we actually are in range of this NPC. And then we also check if we actually point at this NPC with our mouse. And then we can also check if we click on yes and if we are not hovering. So we're doing the same things as we did before. So over here, we get a reference to the shopkeeper. Then we check if we have this script and we are also in range. Then we're going to take our interaction. Well, we actually just copy this part. Interaction text, we're going to set to talk, and this one will be true. So we basically showed the interaction text, and we also want to say talk, or maybe something else, because this is a person, so we want to talk with him. But if we actually click on our mouse button, then we want to be able to start the interaction. So input, get mouse button down, 0. Okay, so basically when we click on the left mouse button and shop is talking with player is false. So if we already talk with the NPC, we don't want to talk with him again. We don't want any kind of looping to happen. And then we're simply going to use the shop script and we're going to call this talk method, the talk method that we created over here. Okay, so we're simply going to display the dialog UI. Another thing that we need to do inside the selection manager is go to the bottom and we have this part over here that we check all the different interactables because we want to also erase the interaction text. So over here we simply add and is not shop. So now we can save this. We can also save the shopkeeper script. Now we want to create some kind of UI for this shop dialog. So we're going to expand our main canvas and we're going to create a new UI image. So if we double click on it, we can see it over here. We can also add the game screen over here so we can see how it looks. Then we're going to click over here and hold Alt and expand so it will take the entire area. But we're going to change the size to be a bit smaller. Let's just make sure that it's exactly in front of us. And we're going to position it somewhere in the middle. Of course, it depends on your game. Maybe you want it to take the entire area. We're just going to set it over here to be in the middle somewhere. And we're going to take the anchors and we're going to add the anchors to actually support it. So it will be able to look the same in different resolutions. Let's just add it over here. So we have these anchors and we have the size for the UI. Now we don't really need this background color. We're going to get rid of it. So we're going to make it transparent and we're going to add some kind of text and also 3 different buttons, one for the buying system, one for the selling system, and one for the exiting of this system. So over here inside this image, we're just going to rename this image to be Shop UI. And inside we're going to have a UI Text Mesh Pro. Again, we're going to click over here, Alt and expand it so we can see the anchors. We're going to move it to the top. We're going to adjust the anchors. Then we're also going to add a UI button, the same thing, click over here, Alt, expand it. We're going to move this down over here and over here. And then we're going to simply click on the button, Control D to duplicate it. We're going to move it down over here and duplicate again for the other button. And now we just need to make sure that all of these anchors are in the correct position. So for this, we have our anchors over here. Then for the second button, we need to make sure they're also holding on to it. And for the last button, we're going to do it. It's a bit tricky because we cannot see the anchors, but if we disable these buttons and we click on this one, we can see the anchors. So we need to make sure the anchor is over here and also over here. And now we can do this for the second button just to make sure that the anchors are in the correct position, and also for the first button. Yes, so all the anchors are in the correct position. Now we're simply going to change all of the UI, so we're going to rename the text into title. Then we're going to have this first button to be the buy button. The second one will be the sell button. And the last one will be the exit button. Then we're going to change the title, place it in the center, and say something like, how can I help you? Of course, we're going to use our font. Then we're going to do the same thing for these buttons. So we're going to have we're going to use some kind of UI that we already used in the past. We're going to do the same thing for these ones. And we're going to change the font as well. Now that we have the UI done, we need to add all the references into the shopkeeper script over here. So we have the shopkeeper dialog UI, and this is this entire shop UI. So we're going to simply click on the shopkeeper and lock him in place. And then we're going to drag this shop UI over here. We have the buy button, which is this one. We have the sell one. We have the exit one. And we also need both buy panel and sell panel, but we still did not create them. Now, because we're going to deal with the buying system in the next episode, we still don't have these panels. So because we don't want to have a null reference, we're going to add just the UI for maybe the day UI or something like that. Just something that will be over here so we don't get a null reference. Of course, in the next episode, we're going to add the buy UI over here and the sell UI over here when we get to the selling system. So we're going to disable the shop UI and we're going to test this out. Of course, it's very small. So now when we approach the shopkeeper, it will show us this talk option. And then when we left click, it's going to open the dialog UI. But for now, we can still move and the cursor is not unlocked. So we need to take care of this as well. Now, if you remember from previous episodes or basically from the beginning of the series, we're always using this very nasty way of checking if the player should move. And if all of these systems are false, then we're going to allow movement. But this is not efficient because we can have more and more systems and we will always have to add them over here. So this is not the ideal way of checking it. Instead, we want to create some kind of movement manager that is going to tell us if we can move or not, and then use this one boolean to check inside our movement scripts, because we also have the mouse movement script, right? So if we go to the mouse movement, we have this very long and ugly line over here that checks all of these different systems. So we want to get rid of this. This has nothing to do with the shopping system, but this is just a way to improve our code. So over here, let's create a new object and name it Movement Manager. We're going to create a script with the same name, Movement Manager. Obviously, it's going to be a singleton because we want to be able to access it in different situations. So we're simply going to copy this part over here. We can also actually create this region over here. I don't know if this is the right way to spell it. And we're going to add an end region over here. And now we can simply collapse this entire thing. Inside the Movement Manager, we're not going to have too much. We're simply going to have our bools. So we're going to have a public bool can move. It will be true. Then public bool can look around. True. So this will basically be for the mouse movement and the keyboard movement. Then we want to be able to allow these things. So public void enable movement. And we also want to have one for the mouse. So public void enable look. So look will be for the mouse. Now, if you ask why are we not creating also a disable look and a disable movement, and that's just because we're going to use the same method for enabling and disabling. So we're simply going to set our can move over here and our can look around over here. And the way we're going to trigger it is by providing a bool that will be named trigger. So if we want to enable the movement, we're simply going to pass in true. And if we want to disable it, we're simply going to pass in false. So this way we don't need to create a separate method for enabling and then a separate method for disabling. We can have one method that will receive a bool. If it's true, it's going to make it true. And if it's false, it's going to make it false. Now that we have this script, we're going to open our shopkeeper. And inside the talk method over here, we want to actually lock the movement. We want to lock the mouse and allow the cursor to be usable. So over here, we're going to say movement manager instance enable movement. And this will be false. Then movement manager instance enable look. And this will be false as well, but we also want to disable the cursor. So cursor lock state, and we don't want to lock it. We actually don't want to lock it. Then cursor visible true, right? Because when we open the menu, we want to see the cursor and we want to be able to lock the movement. But then when we stop talking, we do the opposite. So we set both of these to true because we want to be able to move again. And then we lock the cursor and we also make it invisible. So false. Okay. Now, just because we call these methods doesn't mean that it's actually going to enable or disable the movement. We need to go to the actual movement scripts and use this movement manager, right? So inside of our player movement, instead of checking all of these different things, we are going to simply use the movement manager. Now, I'm not going to delete all of this because you will still have to go to all of these systems and use the movement manager over there in order to allow or disable the movement. So I'm simply going to comment this out for now, and I'm going to use our new method, which will be movement manager instance can move. So if this can move bool is true, we want to allow movement. And if it's false, we don't want to allow movement. And this way, all we need to do is always check the state of this bool. We don't need to check all the different systems. If we have the campfire manager UI, or if we have the storage UI, or if we have the dialog UI, we don't want to check all of the different systems. We want to be able to check one bool and then allow or not allow the movement. So now you simply need to go to all of these places. For example, let's say the storage manager. And inside the storage manager, we have the storage UI open. And this is exactly what we used over here, right? The storage UI open. So now everywhere we actually set it to be true, we can also set the movement manager instance enable movement, and we're going to set it to be true. So if you don't need this, you can remove this, but we're basically allowing the movement by using the movement manager instead of using this thing over here. Again, I don't know, I don't remember if we use it in a different place, so for now just don't remove it, but we're not going to use it anymore for the movement. And then we also set it to be false, so again, just take your movement manager and set this to be false. And if you have this in another place, then you can do the same thing. So now you need to do the same thing for all these different systems. So this is a more efficient way. But we also have our mouse movement. So we're going to open our mouse movement. And again, we have this very long line over here. So we're going to simply comment this out and create this thing instead. So I commented out this entire part with these braces over here. So I just created another braces over here. This is just so you can remember what are the systems that you need to upgrade with this new movement manager. But for now, we're simply going to use our movement manager instance can look around bool, and it will check if this bool is true. It's going to allow the movement. So you can see that it's much more efficient because now we only need to check one bool instead of checking all of these systems. And if we add more systems into the game, it will just make it very ugly and very long. So we can just use this one bool. And now, as I told you, you need to go to all of these systems. For example, our inventory system, we are using this is open bool. So instead, everywhere we're using and setting this is open, like over here, we can set the movement manager instance can look around and set it to be false. And also in different parts when we actually open the UI, when we close the UI, right? So instead of setting this one, we're going to set the movement manager. Now again, if you don't want to do this, if you still want to use the old way, if you still want to use this old long way, you can use it, but I'm just telling you the more efficient way. Another thing we need to do is go into our selection manager, and over here, when we actually set this to be true, it's not always going to show us talk, because when we actually start the dialog, we want to get rid of this talk interaction text, right? So we're still going to talk with him, but we don't want to see this anymore. So over here, we're simply going to create an if statement. So if we're inside a range and we're also talking, if we're not talking, then we want to make this talk visible, else we simply want to disable this and we want to make it empty, okay? So now that we have all of this, we're going to save the different scripts. We're going to make sure that our shopkeeper has all of its references. We are also going to check our shop UI. We're going to make sure that it's closed. And now we're going to start the game and see that everything is working. So now we can approach this NPC. We can see this talk interaction text. And if we left click, it's going to open this panel. So we can click on leave and this will simply close the UI. We can also click on the sell or buy, but for now we don't have these systems. We don't even have the UI for these systems, so it's not going to work. In the next episode, we're going to create our buying system to actually be able to buy items. And in the episode after that, we're going to create the selling system. But this is just a preparation for these systems. So that's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. If you're still not a subscriber, it will be very helpful if you subscribe. You can also become a member of the channel and get access to the Discord server and also get different perks depending on the membership level. And I'll see you next time.